Ciao, welcome to Celebrating Culture. In this episode, we'll continue to explore the Sicilian sound. We'll start with songstress Michela Musolino. Michela will tell us about barbershop quartets in Sicily in the 1600s and the Dur's Funeral March. Historian Shane Lief discusses Antonio Maggio, who wrote the first song with the word blues in it. We will interview two generations of the Assanto family. You can hear jazz from the Assunto Brothers Tribute Band, which is now in their sixth generation of playing jazz and a fixture at our annual Italian jazz concert. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Our news spent 5 years touring Louisiana. We've interviewed countless numbers of people, the people that make it happen, that put on Mardi Gras, the chefs, the artists, the backbone of Louisiana. We've taken those interviews and made a show called Celebrating Culture. But we've also taken those interviews and put them in a tour app, New Orleans Insider Tours. To download the apps, all you have to do is point your phone at the flow code in the camera mode. Once you have the app downloaded, you'll have access to putting together the best game plan to experience in Louisiana. You can start with Little Palermo, which is 50 points of interest on the Italian community, and then go to Statue Stories and Spirits, over 150 stops in the French Quarter and CBD. Where to dine in New Orleans, what rooftop bars give you the best view, how to see the Gulf of Mexico from the coastal towns, driving up to the Bonnie and Clyde Museum near Shreveport, or up to Vicksburg. New Orleans and Louisiana are must-see for everyone, and there's so much to see. So we hope you enjoy it, and as we say here, let the good times roll. Hi, welcome back to Celebrating Culture. We're here today at the Brick Oven Cafe in Kenner, Louisiana, and I'm with Michela Musolino. Michela is a Sicilian songstress. Your knowledge of Sicilian music history is just overwhelming to me, so I'm so grateful you're on the show.
Thanks for having me. Well, if we go back to about 350 BC, we have a historian by the name of Timaeus, and he was from Taormina, and he recorded a lot of history of the ancient world, of ancient Sicily and ancient Greece. And he talked to us about itinerant celebrations that would take place throughout the night. They would involve music and dancing. They sprang out of religious rituals, which pretty much all our traditions of music came from originally religious rituals. We can start seeing a pattern with this idea of the music and the itinerant musicians and celebrations and the secular music growing out of religious rituals. And then if we jump forward a little bit, we could look at the court of King Frederick II, Re Federico II, and he was also called the Stupor Mondi. He was the wonder of the world because of the way he led the world in art and literature. So his court was a center for literature, and it's believed that the sonnet was born in his court. And it's something that was called the Ottava Siciliana. So it's 11 syllables, hendecasyllabic, which is very indicative of a sonnet. And it's 8 lines that rhyme A, B, A, B, A, B. And that we know is the first 8 lines of a sonnet. And why is that so important? Because most of Sicilian folk music and traditional music is in that form, that structure.
Also, during this period here, we get into the 12th and 13th century. You were talking about like barbers and the songs for the fishing. Tell us some of that background.
In Sicily, barbershops were a social center too. It wasn't just a place for men to get their haircut. It was a place for men to congregate, and there was music. Typically, barbers were musicians. Why is this important? Well, it's a very old tradition in Sicily, and the first time it was documented was in 1491. It's a document from Messina, and it talks about a barber. His name was Gregorio de Berto. He tells the story that he had a student, and he was teaching his student vocal compositions with musical accompaniment. And this is seminal for the work that we do because, first of all, it's the first time that the barber was referred to not only as a profession, but as a profession that was involved with music. It was identified barber and music. And it also identified the fact that this student was being taught from the body of Sicilian songs. So in 1491, already the world was identifying Sicily as having its own kind of music, as having a repertoire that was particular to Sicily.
Coming to you today at Aiden Gill for Men Barbershop. This is a phenomenal place. It looks like it's 1917 when jazz was being created and barbers sang. I'm with Shane Lief. Shane has his master's, 2 masters, one in musicology and one in language. He's working on his PhD in language, and he's written a book called Giacomo about the Mardi Gras Indians. Shane, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
There's a gentleman you wrote an essay about, Antonio Maggio.
Yes.
Tell
indeed.
me about him.
Okay, so Antonio Maggio, a man who's born in Sheffield, Sicily back in 1876. He's known as composing the first blues song with 12-bar blues and blues in the title that was published.
And what's the name of the song again?
I Got the Blues.
I understand he comes over and he's actually a barber.
In 1876, he's born in Sheffield, comes over in 1892. He's in New Orleans for a bit. His brother Rosario, who's older, has a barbershop. And when he's at the barbershop, he's entertaining people by singing operatic arias just out of the blue.
Years ago, barbers sang.
Absolutely. He was working at the barbershop. He was playing music with his friends, playing guitar, mandolin. He was a multi-instrumentalist. Buddy Bolden was active in the jazz scene. And he would hang out at the barbershop of George Galloway, only 2 blocks away from where Maggio was at the Poitras Market sometimes. So these guys, they definitely met and they overlapped in their work. When I read about this and I think about these songs and I hear them, it's like the Italians of New Orleans were just oozing musicality. It all came from the old country. It's almost like it was just in their bones, because when Maggio would go to the barbershop, he would be singing these operatic arias just out of the blue because it's just in him. And so when he comes to New Orleans, it makes perfect sense that he's curious about this guy, this older black man on the levee playing the guitar, and he incorporates that into his, what he calls an up-to-date rag. You know, I Got the Blues. And, you know, we can call it blues, ragtime, proto-jazz, whatever we want to call it. It's that mixture of different groups of people who are listening to each other and they're impacting each other. This is more like an acoustic illustration of what he might have heard on the levee, right? So. So something like that, you know, that's what he's hearing. And then when he goes home and he's like, oh, maybe I'll like make it more into like a rag. It's like. Something like that, so he's transforming it into a rag. Maggio, as a person, as an individual, seems to embody this marvelous trajectory of Italian speakers who come to the United States, become American, but they still retain a lot of their culture.
Shane, I want to thank you for being on the
Thank
show. In New Orleans, we had the funeral marches.
There was a historian, his name was the Marchese of Villabianca. In the mid-1700s, he was already identifying this tradition of having musicians and singers at funerals in Sicily, and he already identified it as a well-established tradition. One of the things that was interesting is that in around 1661, the Jesuits in Palermo started a tradition of what we call the Orbi, and Orbi means blind or blind men. In that culture, it was an agrarian culture, so it was felt that these young boys would be at a disadvantage. How could they survive? How could they have a family if they were blind? So the Jesuits trained them musically. And the idea was they would be hired to make music for the sacred events. Among the events they would make this music for would also be, they would play the novenas and they would play them at the funerals. It was identified as starting around 1661. And typically they were sent out in 2 by 2. It grew, eventually they would add more musicians, and eventually these itinerant musicians would also not necessarily all be blind. It started out as something that would help the blind men, and that continued really into the 20th century.
Eterno Redentore, Cristo duci, dammi la forza e non m'abbandonare. Quanto canto con gloria ed amore dell'Eterno Padre, la sua divina luce. la Trinità Santissima Divina, lo Dio figliolo in seconda persona, tra questa macchina fragile e meschina fece all'uomo e con l'uomo s'accomuna. Ci fu Madre Maria, Summa Regina, a San Giuseppe per figlio si dona, si fa chiamare in questa parte fascia figlio di un artigiano mastro d'ascia.
So that evolved into the second line.
So it has ancient roots, goes back to the 1400s and the 1600s.
Michela, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of Celebrating Culture. Celebrating Cultures organized the content from our show into an app called New Orleans Insider Tours. Download the app to see views of the New Orleans skyline from various rooftop bars around the city. Go up to Rosie's on the Roof. It gives you a great perspective of the city. New Orleans has a tremendous amount to offer, but leaving the city and exploring Louisiana is a must. If you'd like to enjoy the coast of Louisiana, go down to Delacroix. If you'd like to know the history of the river, go up to the Great River Road Museum in Darrow. Poverty Point is located between Monroe and Tallulah, Louisiana, and is one of 23 World Heritage Sites in America. Hi, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of Celebrating Culture. On News has interviewed hundreds of people and produced dozens of episodes for local broadcasting. Awesome people doing great things to inspire us all. If you'd like to watch a specific interview, please visit our YouTube channel and subscribe.
Right now, let's keep it swinging and meet the Dukes of Dixieland.
The Dukes of Dixieland.
Hi, welcome back to Celebrating Culture. We're in Metairie, Louisiana, which is next to New Orleans, Louisiana, the birthplace of jazz. And we're at Mo's Chalet, which is hosting the New Orleans Jazz Club, America's oldest jazz club. And I'm with Deano Assunto, whose family has 6 generations in Louisiana and goes back to the beginning of jazz. Deano, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
So tell me, your great-grandfather comes over from Italy.
He came in 1900. He had a degree in tailoring. He started Southern tailoring down south and in Louisiana. He became a citizen in 1915. He was a musician. I've got photos of him playing in City Park in New Orleans. He played the piccolo. He had 4 children, and one of his children was Anthony Jacinto Assunto. Later on, he would be known as Papa Jack Assunto. Papa Jack got a degree in music, also had a business degree, Tulane University as a matter of fact, and then he went back to school and graduated in 1949 from Loyola University with a degree in music. He then was the first music professor or music director of Redemptorist High School back in the late 40s.
And then his sons take it to another level.
His 2 sons, Frank and Freddie, they both went and played music. Older guys were inside playing the music, the old style. Frank and Freddie were on this porch with all their young friends, all his teenagers, and they were speeding the songs up double time and just putting their own twist on the music.
High Fidelity, I believe, is associated with them?
They started recording for audio fidelity in what was called high fidelity back then. It wasn't mono, and I think November of 1957, Audio Fidelity recorded the first stereo recording in America 6 months before RCA did. So the Dukes of Dixieland, Frank and Freddie Assunto, were the first musicians and band to record in stereo in this country.
They also were recording in New Orleans with Cosmo Matassa.
Yes, their first recordings were actually the old wax recordings at Cosmos Matassa's J&M studio, where Danny Barker played and Papa Celestine recorded there, and all the greats, Fast Domino. The first early recordings of music here in New Orleans were all done at Cosmos Matassa's recording studio downtown in New Orleans.
And then also Pete Fountain?
Pete Fountain actually started with them in 1949 with the Horace Heights Show. It was a talent contest, a national contest that came down to New Orleans, and they put a band together that had Pete Fountain in it. What the boys used to do was, in high school days, and they would take a station wagon or a pickup truck and they would paint it the color of the opposing football team that was visiting New Orleans. So that way when they pulled up to the gate, in order to get into the field, they would have their band playing on the back of this truck, and they would pretend that they were the visiting team's band. And so Pete Fountain was sitting up in the audience, up in his band was Warren Easton, he was in the band there. And when he saw these guys doing this, he went and introduced himself and jumped in the back of the truck, and they became friends, and they recorded one album together. It was called At the Jazz Band Ball, 1955, on the RCA label.
They played on Royal Street.
Yes, they did. 100 block of Royal. It was Tony Amarico's Parisian Room. And by 19 years old, they got into the famous door, and it was supposed to be a 3-week stance, ended up being 3.5 years.
Frank in front of the Mardi Gras Lounge. We switch back to the front door of the famous Store Lounge. You're looking again at Frank and Freddie Assunto and their group.
Just a closer walk with thee. Oh, Lord, grant it if you please.
I've been watching you guys. You guys are on tour basically in Louisiana.
Yeah, we just got back last week. We played the Elkhart Jazz Festival.
You got through COVID by playing free for your neighbors. They loved it.
Yes, they did.
You played at Homeless House recently.
Oh yes, we played a nice homeless house for the St. Joseph's Festival. That was very nice, yes.
That's right, the Dukes of Dixieland was once heralded as one of the best in New Orleans jazz. Today that legacy lives on through the next generation of the Assuntos and their tribute band, and they're with us this morning.
And also, your niece is part of the band.
Yes, that's the Lexie Assunto. She is my brother Frank's only daughter. Well, she's a singer, and she's very, very good. I guess it comes naturally to her because as a child, she was taught by Betty Owens Assunto, which Betty Owens was a hillbilly singer back in the 40s.
What's the matter? You know I like my jazz both day and night. And if you don't play it up and I don't feel right, it's a great time. Ooh, it's a wailing jazz time. Don't want it fast, don't want it slow.
And I'm with Lexie Assunto, who's one of the best performers I've heard. Lexie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
I see you seem like you're having a lot of fun performing and being the 5th generation of your family's band.
I am. It's great. It's always a fun time up there, and people love to see us keeping the legacy and the tradition alive.
Now, you have a great voice. Did you know you had a voice from your family?
I was always singing as a child. I grew up in my Aunt Betty's house, the Duchess of Dixieland, and she was always singing jazz and teaching me how to harmonize and do melodies with her, and just family reunions, things like that. But I was always a little shy to get up on the stage, so it's been a nice little change of pace. I grew up with my Uncle Deano showing me all of these videos of my family performing and the codes.
How does this come to be?
So the story I hear is actually kind of funny. My Uncle Deano and our tuba player, Jim, were speaking about starting this tribute band. And they were going through some family members. I guess they were looking for vocalists online. And somehow my profile picture came up. And Jim asked my uncle, he said, "This is your niece? Are you related to her?" He's like, "Yeah, it's my niece." "Does she sing?" "She used to when she was a kid." And so they gave me a call and asked if I wanted to come try out, because he wasn't sure if, singing when I was 9 or 10 in front of him was still going to be great at 30.
It's kind of great working with the family still too, huh?
Yeah, it's great. My Uncle Deano is wonderful. He's always kept the legacy alive for us and my siblings, and we've always known the history and have grown to appreciate it, so it's really wonderful being full circle and being able to keep it alive.
You imagine one day doing a duet with your daughter?
She has actually come on stage a couple of times, and we do duets every day in the car, and so she's a little shy though, like me, so maybe in the future? I don't know.
Lexie, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
And you got a great tuba player. Jim knows his history, so before the songs, he seems like he lets the audience know a little bit about it.
We are a group of musicians dedicated to playing, as Louis Armstrong would say, the good old good ones, the ones that Frank, Freddie, and Papa Jack played for so many years, not only on Bourbon Street, but on the Ed Sullivan Show, on the Tonight Show, on the Merv Griffin Show, on the Dick Cavett Show, on the Kate Smith Show. I know I'm forgetting another half dozen or so. But it's good New Orleans jazz music.
We're doing more than just play the tunes. Anybody can play a jukebox. What he's doing is sharing the legacy, the musical legacy of Frank and Freddie and Papa Jack and Betty. The history of the Assunto family is part of our show.
Is there a website?
Yes, there is a website called theAssuntoDukesTribute.com, and we have a Facebook page called the Assunto Dukes Tribute also.
Deano, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of Celebrating Culture. Celebrating Culture is brought to you by Awe News. Awe News also produces New Orleans Insider Tours, which are 10 self-guided tours of New Orleans and Louisiana. If you want to enjoy oysters raised a new way off bottom, stop by Dickie Brennan's Bourbon House. If you want to enjoy charbroiled oysters, stop by Drago's. Hi, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of Celebrating Culture. Awe News has interviewed hundreds of people and produced dozens of episodes for local broadcasting. Awesome people doing great things to inspire us all. If you'd like to watch a specific interview, please visit our YouTube channel and subscribe. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Celebrating Culture. The Sicilian sound was woven into the gumbo of American music. I hope you visit New Orleans and hear jazz from the Assunto Brothers Tribute Band. The children of the stars of yesterday keep alive the inspirations and dreams that motivated their ancestors to come to America. If you'd like to see the full interviews, please visit our YouTube channel, On News.
It gives me a great chance to see such young fellows playing a style of jazz that was invented, Frankie, long before you were born. How did you get this authentic New Orleans sound?
Well, Gary, being from New Orleans and having a father who plays some tailgate trombone, it came by us pretty easy.
Dad is with you tonight, isn't he?
Oh, yeah, Dad's here. Would like you to meet him. Papa Jack.
Hi, Papa Jack. How are you? Good to see you. Well, here you're going to hear some of the real New Orleans jazz, and just listen. Keep your ears open. This is Over the Waves, usually a waltz, and listen to the two trombones working together, the Dukes of Dixieland.
Figlio di un artigiano mastrodash, s'abbascia come il talo per riposante, dopo il suo felice nascimento, sono io con San Giuseppe patio tanto, da fanno bene guai, da voglia stente. Lì giancanne circa come canta, Gesù per dare fine allo sontento, a Giuseppe e Maria fa riverenza, così di casa sua fece spartenza. La penitenza mise a predicare, a così diceva ad ogni creatura. Ognuno deve penitenza fare a ciò che si sradica l'errore. E ora mettiamo un poco a contemplare di Giuseppe e di Maria lo suo dolore, pensando che per te l'oggetto caro restare tutti noi con pianto amaro.